यहाँ पर लोहे की मदद से बनवा कर पक्षी चलाए जाते हैं। मोर है, चिड़िया है, तोता है, सब बने हुए हैं। पक्षियों को चढ़ाया जाता है। देखो लगे हैं और अपनी मानता है पूरी और
If I remember, it was harvest, and we only picked some root vegetables. That year was pretty hard, so hot and dry that there was not much to grow and feed on. I come from an extremely arid land where water is evaporating. I was raised in Lamentos across Sierra Blanca at the Mexican side of the Chihuahua Desert. My father and I were plant collectors, mainly interested in xerophytes, plants that are drought resistant and found in the desert. The last news I got from him was many years ago. He sent me a postcard in a small bag with seeds, sweets, and stones. They were date seeds, and I still keep them with me. He was thinning dates near Indio in California. Anyway, the postcard said, "These are the only trees we even see here on the desert. They are all planted by man. There is one in our auto courtyard almost ready to pick." After receiving this postcard, my father passed away. He got food poisoned. We're using many different plants, insects, and herbs in general. We even used very strange species of mushrooms, like the bleeding fairy helmets that came from Brazil. One of the prettiest bioluminescent mushrooms. In other words, mushrooms that glowed in the dark. We also experimented with fireflies and some millipede species. The millipedes were highly toxic, and all of them were found exclusively in the mountainous regions of California. These millipedes spent their day buried under the soil, but upon nightfall, these blind creatures crawl out from the ground to feed on dead plants and emit a constant glow from their exoskeleton. Their glow is menacing to predators. When disturbed or threatened, they release toxic cyanide from tiny pores in their bodies. We extracted the fluorescent protein and combined it with herbs, following Tibetan medicinal plant knowledge. We placed fake painted millipedes made of clay alongside real glowing ones at night and examined them the next morning. To our surprise, the fake millipedes were viciously attacked upon 4 times more often than the real glowing ones by what they deduced were rodents. Amazingly, these millipedes have evolved a different mechanism to glow that doesn't use luciferase, but employs a photoprotein instead that lights up when activated with calcium-rich compounds. If combined with sage from the southwest, they would work as blood purifiers. In a liquid reduction, it could even help to improve immunity in some humans with terminal disease. We also noticed if we sprayed it on top of the crops, we could avoid pests, and they were even visible at night. This was very interesting as the plants were gaining some sort of autonomy, like if they were emerging with the photoprotein. We used two of Frederick Hammersley's computer drawings and one painting called Nip and Tuck as a spatial reference to build a garden following the shapes of color in its hard edges. Each color would define a group of plants, varying in kind and their radioactivity. For many years, it was implemented in several fields worldwide as part of a classified agricultural program. They even tested the toxic cyanide as nuclear fuel for atomic reactors, but without any success in replacing uranium. Some say that in times of Amazons, these warrior women would eat the millipedes as an enhancer to be stronger. In some cases, even wiser. They also realized it could bring intense hallucinations. In Cappadocia, for example, a group of farmers testified to have seen some abnormal manifestations in the sky, the same as in 1967, close to the ranch Tres Cerritos in New Mexico. In both cases, they saw a dancing light that disappeared and appeared like a ghostly floating object around the plantations. Then they have witnessed forms that depicted a horse or something similar after describing a non-specific shape at night. Some fields were infested with this photoprotein, and we didn't relate their visions with this chemical. They had huge kernels of rice. The size of their corn was supernatural, and their cherries were abundant. They stopped having problems with insects because the millipedes colonized all the territory. They went in search of these visions and tried to decipher its meaning. At night, things don't appear as they are. Shapes are confused with shades, and shades are mistaken for tangible beings. Surrealistic landscapes that my father described on his deathbed. Dreamlike figures in the sky. We can go closer and observe. You see, they look like horses. They thought they revealed something from the future or maybe from the past. While their gaze was still concentrated in these hallucinations, they also got closer to horses, bonding in deep relationships. They dominated, domesticated, and trained them to become extensions of their own body, elongations of their unfulfilled dreams. They reproduced small copies of these visions in bronze, in clay, in stone, carved out of wood. For them, it represented a way to control their impulses, which came from the darkest corners of the subconscious. By replicating horse-like figures, they could visualize themselves from another distance. Within this animal, they found companionship and a vehicle to travel overseas. All these illusions came with truths and consequences. In reality, it was the poison from the fluorescent proteins that manipulated every action. The way they used their eyes was not the only problem. It came from somewhere in the brain and the guts, both related to the food they ingested. Phytotherapy is the intended medical use of plants and plant extracts for therapeutic purposes. Zoopharmacognosy is a behavior in which non-human animals apparently self-medicate by selecting and ingesting or topically applying plants, soils, insects, and psychoactive drugs to prevent or reduce the harmful effects of parasitic infestation or poisoning. A well-known example of zoopharmacognosy occurs when dogs eat grass to induce vomiting. For example, North American brown bears make a paste of osha roots and saliva and rub it through their fur to repel insects or soothe bites. Navajo Indians are said to have learned to use this root medicinally from the bear for treating stomach aches and infections. If we take a look at the anatomy of a horse, there are 22 vital points that define the energetic route of rationalism. It indicates that all the motions in the body of this animal were meant to be an insert and impression of humans. Also, it indicates that all emotions that this animal radiate are assumed to be in service of them as well. Both men and horse, visionary and vision, are contradictions, entering from the cranium to the neck, from the neck to the spine, and from spine to limbs. This constellation of points brings along a failed system of beliefs. Because in its unusual and rare shape, we're not able to find any reflection of ourselves, not even a small echo. A constant digestive mechanism of ingestion and expulsion. While these visions migrate from one point to the other in darkness and gloom, the symptoms of all those who experienced this phenomenon were the same, sharing identical physical and mental reactions. They lost balance, and their line of thoughts was blurry. Their eyes became obsolete. Their arms and legs got harder and solid. Their faces transformed into iconic distortions. Heads without limbs, limbs without heads. Bodies mutated into formless constitutions. Mutilated. Statues of legitimized violence of civilized men. Searching for immortality, for perpetuity, for endurance, for an endless life, an incomplete quest for perfection, framed in the backbone of marble, granite, and other materials used to commemorate hegemonic powers. We fell into the same delirium, and we haven't woken up. The same eye that makes human and serpent one character, that unifies two separate kingdoms in one. Objects that, far from any explanation, have been created for thousands of years to give meaning to the meaningless or to the indecipherable. Therefore, when taken from the original context and shifting from their natural state. They are trapped, concealed, stuck, immobile, eliminating and erasing any kind of cosmogony, suffocated, disfigured, amputated, and gone. Phrenology, meaning knowledge of the mind, is a pseudo-medicine primarily focused on measurements of the human skull. Based on the concept that the brain is the organ of the mind, and that certain brain areas have localized, specific functions. This thinking was influential in the 19th century psychiatry. The assumption that character, thoughts, and emotions are located in specific parts of the brain is considered an important historical advance towards neuropsychology. Slavery, for example, can be seen as a model of the physical and moral perfection available to those who adopted the phrenological program. A series of dictates on everything from diet to mental and physical exercise. By creating portraits, genre scenes, ideal figures, and even landscapes that embodied the theory's teachings, these heads, more than vases for perfumes and elixirs, are trophies kept to be profound memories of spiritual possessions. Even plants were classified based on social status. For example, in some cases, rooted vegetables were not considered suitable for elite consumption because they grew underground. Elites preferred to consume food that came from trees elevated from the filth of the common world. Thus, food served as an indicator of class. In some plants and flowers, they could trace all the paths of their rules in calculated maps. Suspiciously, the visions caused by the fluorescent protein found in the millipedes enabled the possibility to unearth and spot the location of these rules in the organs of the subject throughout precise coordinates. Categorical thinking was then treated as a mental disorder because it suppressed the faculty of dreaming as psychedelia. These anomalies revealed their enchantment in shape of talismans that had the potential to protect and predict the forthcoming. When all this was discovered, sophisticated surgical procedures had to be carried out. For instance, the medium George Chapman is controlled by the ophthalmologist William Lang to operate the eyes of those who had hallucinations. Dr. Lang died in 1937, and George Chapman continues operating until today, explaining he is conducted by Lang's spirit. On the other hand, Tony Agpawa, a Philippine surgeon, uses only his hands and energy to extract the malady. His abilities and successful operations are still a mystery. Another physician and reverend called Alex L. Orbito also executes these kinds of surgical interventions. He starts by touching and sensing the place of the object. Then, with his nails, he goes through the skin, opening a small hole where he can fit his fingers, which work as tentacles or tools that are sensible to touch. When the object is detected, he extracts it, and in some occasions it's preserved for posterity. Like nothing ever happened, the patient is treated and barely a scar is visible. This group of objects were found in the stomach and digestive systems of some animals and humans that had the visions. They now are kept and organized and are believed to be part of other extinct civilizations. Almost by magic, it's like if an external force inserted these objects into the bodies without previous consent. Resembling shapes found in nature, they turned into exotic forms of currency and commodity exchange. Forged, copied, and replicated, losing value while their desire for more gained sovereignty. By duplicating, they also lost their original mysticism, bringing catastrophic results to entire communities. In this anatomical chart, we can see the central human spine as the main conduct where these visions accumulate, and where their trajectory can be outlined. Crucified before anyone else, they can define the shape of the face, of the head, of the most precious features, of the expressions, of the brain and intestine, of thoughts and ambitions, of mental and physical health. From the inside, you could tell how is the outside, and by looking at the outside, you can etch the inside. It's a basic principle. They've been carving and erecting their faith in multiple structures. The architecture of their dreams will always be encircled by their capacity to build palpable spatial dimensions, where they can extend collective convictions and project their visible intentions into elevated states. When all elements are together and placed within the equal levels of acceptance, diversity, and solidarity, the hallucinations are remodeled and transmitted beyond any kind of religious or political doctrine, abolishing ideological thinking. Back at the beginning, here we are in front of the worshipping tree in India. Each single article and movement has a purpose and reason to be. Unlike this other tree, ignored and chopped by people that aren't aware of its existence. rooted in simulated soil and ground, fragmentary, forcibly displaced by the visions of others. We perceive them all in the wind which sails over mountains and deserts, in the glow of spring and at harvest. They are in the people as they work and dance. Like my father said, plants are regarded as having actions in terms of their energies and affecting the energies of the bodies of others. Almost all societies, with the exception of cultures influenced by industrialization, recognize this kind of use. The practitioner is regarded as endowed with gifts or powers that allow the use of herbs in a way that is hidden from the average person, and the herbs are assumed to affect the spirit or soul of the visionary. Last thing he said, beauty is not a protection against predators anymore. Within the gray area of Diasporus, insects migrate before dawn.